Hey, Jam, have you ever wondered about if what even is salt and is all salt salty?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've wondered that until now.
And I know you've wondered about stainless steel and sourdough.
I have wondered about that.
And I know that you've also wondered about chemicals and sound waves. And we're going to do all of our bonus episodes, all of our questions about sourdough.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a guest star of Maison, my lovely husband. And we're going to answer a few other listener questions and read a few fun comments in today's Ask a Chemist.
Ask a Chemist. Okay, let's do it.
Yay! Hey, I'm Melissa.
I'm Jam.
And I'm a chemist.
And I'm not.
And welcome to Chemistry for Your Life.
The podcast helps you understand the chemistry of your everyday life.
Ask a Chemist edition.
Yes.
That was great. We never planned that.
Yeah.
Ever.
I've wanted to do that instead of bonus edition. And then one of the times I did it and Melissa didn't know I was going to do that because I didn't tell her. And then we didn't say the same thing. But Ask a Chemist is exactly what happens in these episodes. So why not call it Ask a Chemist edition? Because as you just heard, Melissa is a chemist and I is not. And we're going to ask her some questions. And there's nothing she can do about it. Ready for the first one?
That's true. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm ready. I'm ready for the first one.
Okay, this is from Latila, one of our Chemmunity members. What is the chemistry of gunshot, residue, and fingerprinting? Whoa.
Okay, so guess what? This is a little bit of a bait and switch. Thank you so much for asking this, Latila. After Latila asked this question, I sent out messages to everyone I could think of who might be interested in doing a forensics podcast episode. And I got at least one taker. And so I think we're going to have a little guest series with a grad student who works on forensics. And I think that'll be really fun.
Nice.
And we've had grad students who are awesome before in the form of Claire. Everyone loved Claire. That was one of our most watched episodes.
Oh, yeah.
If anything ever happens to me, we'll just be able to let this podcast continue with Claire.
Yeah.
So, all that to say, I have a plan and I'm not going to answer it for you today.
Okay. Well, at least now I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. I think it'll be fun.
This next one is from Kaiba on Instagram. Frequent, very good question asker. Is all salt salty or just NaCl, meaning sodium chloride? Is that correct?
Yes.
Nice.
So I'll start by saying, what even is salt?
What if your response was like, nah, knuckle?
How many times do you think I've heard that joke, listener? And if you're not on the YouTube channel, you might not be able to see the breaking the fourth wall where I'm looking directly into the camera with like a Jim Halpert face.
Nah, gets said a lot.
Yeah, sodium chloride jokes are...
Oh, interesting. I would have thought sodium only, but I didn't think about sodium chloride.
Oh, people who just make sodium jokes. It is hard. Okay, I listened to this bear biologist podcast, and they had a guest on the show, and the guest was like, if not friend, why friend shaped about bear? And he laughed, and he was like, the thing is, you just get those memes sent to you so much that it's like really hard to find one that I haven't seen about bears before. And so he's like, but people still send them all the time. And I was like, you're roasting your listeners so hard right now.
Yeah.
People have sent me chemistry ones that I've never seen before, like since we started this podcast, but it's rare. A lot of times I've already seen them.
So whenever you get one of those puns about like Na or NaCl,
nah, bro, that's a big one.
Are you like, oh, because isn't bromium one too?
Yeah, bromine BR, NaBr, yeah.
Are you ever just like, oh, that's sodium?
No.
Like,
what'd you say? Sodium.
I was trying to say like dumb.
No, yeah. It took me a second. That was clever.
It's hard to say dumb while sneaking a little I in it. That's sodium.
I will say you have caught me off guard more than anyone else probably. I'll never forget about olfactory.
Oh yeah, the good old your good olfactory. Yeah. Okay. That's
but wait. I want to say though, when I get them, I do think it's sweet that people think of me, even if I've seen it like 100 times.
Yeah.
I am like, oh, that was nice. So I just made that eye roll deadpan at Jam because
right.
he deserves it.
Yeah.
It was like, you know.
But please, guys, send as many.
No, really.
No.
I think they're nice.
Send as many as you want.
I think they're nice. I think it's nice that people think of me.
Yeah,
like
totally.
the fact that someone...
We got our email, we got our website, and Melissa's number is to...
You just send my...
just totally dox you right now.
That'd be so sad. But I do think it's nice. Anyone, when they see something and think of you, it's like, oh.
Yeah, that's true. I feel that way for sure. So, I've gotten coffee things. I've gotten...
Yeah.
Both of my names, like... lend themselves to different puns. People say like my first name is actually Josh or Joshua, but both Josh, Joshua, Jam have various jokes. People make the same one a lot. Robinson, like Swiss Family Robinson Crusoe,
or here's to you, Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I've heard all of them over and over and over.
Dude, I've never made that joke to your wife. Here's to you, Mrs. I could do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just don't think of her as Mrs. Robinson, you know? It's
totally.
like weird.
Even my mom didn't love that joke because she would be like, no, that's my mother-in-law. Like,
yeah.
My mother-in-law is Mrs. Robinson. Like she had a feeling of like, that doesn't really sound like no one calls me Mrs. Robinson, Here's
a fun tidbit and then we can get back to chemistry.
Okay.
I recently was sent a picture of a letter that my mom wrote after she was married to my dad to her sister. And in this letter, after she was married and her last name was Collini and she was Mrs. Collini, she called her mother-in-law Mrs. Collini. She said, Mrs. Collini is coming to visit. I was like, that's you. You're Mrs. Collini at this point in your life. Isn't that crazy?
That's very crazy. There's something so odd about whether married or not, just adding the Mr. and Mrs. thing at all or Miss. That I find so strange. Like
I
my
think
name's
it was
never
a
changed.
different time,
Yes.
It's like everybody was Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so.
Right. I'm like, I was actually had a very short term volunteer role at this place in town. Long story. It's like a children with different learning disabilities and different behavioral, whatever kinds of stuff. Some of it's not, it wouldn't even be classified as disability, but that helps them socialize and stuff. I volunteered there for a little less than a year, but they really, for some reason, based on something that they studied, were strict about. Everyone is Mr. or Miss and your last name. Sorry, it's just how it is.
That's crazy.
So I was called Mr. Robinson by not just the kids, but all of my co-volunteers the whole time.
Yeah.
And it was so weird.
Yeah.
It was like the strangest.
That's kind of how I feel about being called doctor, but not by my students now. I'm like, the weirdest thing is when people call me Mrs. Because I'm like, well, that just feels so formal and not anything that anyone ever calls me.
Yeah.
At work, people call me doctor.
Yeah.
But only my students. If like one of my friends or even like the staff who work in the offices that I'm like, we're buds. I'm not teaching you.
Yeah.
If they call me Dr. Collini, I was like, well.
Right. It's like, I am a doctor, but it feels a little formal. Like you and I are friends.
Yeah. Just call me Melissa. Even my students, I would rather them call me Melissa than Mrs. Collini.
Yeah.
Because it just feels weird.
Yep.
I'm like, I got a degree for the doctor.
Yeah.
But what did I get for the Miss? I mean, I just guess I got married.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it does feel oddly formal and like a very
formal.
So here's how to bring it all the way back. If you want to make sure that Melissa feels salty about something, call her Mrs. Collini. All right.
I do tell my students that there is evidence that women in science, the example they give is like how you're very likely to call someone Sherlock, but like the equivalent female person, you would not just use her last name. So it would be like, oh, you've heard of Sherlock, you've heard of Poirot, but you've never heard of Austen because it's Jane Austen. Or like, you've heard of these like famous people that are men, that even fictional ones that only go by their last name, but it's not Curie, it's Marie Curie.
Yeah.
And I guess like there's a few exceptions, but then the same thing is true in medical fields. Like women are way less likely to be addressed by their titles. And so I do tell my students about that. And then I like to pull and here's the anecdote out. I've been called Mrs. at least 6 times this semester. And my coworker who's a male who teaches at the same school to the same demographic students has never been called Mr.
Yeah.
Isn't that fun?
That's very interesting.
I know.
I'm trying to think of like other characters, either, fiction or nonfiction, who could go by their last name. Like, Murder, She Wrote. Like,
what is her name?
the actress is
Angela Lansbury, but who's her?
I don't know, but Lansbury is actually great, iconic last name.
Yeah, but Angela Lansbury,
Yeah, it's a full thing. But I wonder, I can't remember what her last name is in the show. Not that that's on the same exact level.
I watch that a lot too, and I should have it. I love that show.
Yeah.
Oh, that's going to bug me. Okay. Well, we haven't talked about chemistry for a while, so
yeah, let's get back to
hopefully the listeners tune in because they like our banter and not just the chemistry.
Yeah. Hopefully not too salty. Hopefully they're like, if you're saying like, sorry about all the non-chemistry, hopefully they're like, nah, it's okay.
Miss Fletcher. She's Jessica Fletcher.
Yes, that's right. That's actually a great last name for that.
That is, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you figured that out. Good one, Fletcher.
Yeah.
Could work.
It's
just that I guess no one in the show calls her that.
Yeah.
So people would be like, excuse me? Like, Fletcher? They'd be like, oh, Fletch, the Chevy Chase movie. Got it. He is an investigative reporter. Nice. Okay. All right.
Let's get back to chemistry, shall we?
All right. So is all salt salty or just NaCl?
Okay. So let's define what a salt is in the first place. So a salt is a metal plus a nonmetal. And it typically is what we would call an ionic bond. So instead of electrons, bonds are made up of electrons being shared usually. So like in a covalent bond, 2 electrons are equally shared between 2 atoms, and that sharing of electrons is what keeps them close together. But in salts, there's typically an ionic bond, which means one thing has totally given up its electrons. So in NaCl, sodium has actually given up its electrons and chlorine has taken them over. So the sodium giving up its electron became positive, and the chlorine taking over this electron became negative. And now the thing that attracts them to one another is the opposite charge. It's no longer the sharing of electrons, but it's the opposite charge. And so salts are really good at, when you put them in water and stuff, they'll disassociate because they are positive and negative. So like salt water, the reason that salt goes into water is it breaks up those positive and negative charges. Okay, so salt in the ocean and in real life, and table salts, all of these are like, a lot of salt is not just sodium chloride. And so if you've ever seen low sodium salt, they have replaced the sodium with an equivalent ion that would be in the same like column of the periodic table that would be able to form a bond with chlorine in the same way. And so it still gives a flavor to your food, but I don't think it's exactly the same one.
It's how I tasted it. So, it's weird. What do they use typically? Do you know?
I think potassium, but I'm not 100% sure. Let me look at a periodic table real quick.
One of my uncles had to use the
I think
sodium salt.
I think it's often potassium, but lithium salt is actually a antidepressant. And so you can get like salt mixtures, like some of the Himalayan salt and stuff that have a higher lithium content. And it is showed to like positively impact your mood, which is crazy. But there was a specific study that I read where it was like, a little bit of lithium salt. There's like people in part of the world where lithium naturally occurred in their water or something. It's like higher moods or whatever. But there's also lithium salt that's used as like a full-on antidepressant. So usually something in that first periodic table to pair with chlorine. And so I think it still has a flavor, but I just don't think it's exactly the same kind of saltiness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That we associate with NaCl. So... and I think we'd have to talk more about like receptors and what they're picking up on the saltiness to be 100% sure on your taste buds. But I'm going to say they all have a taste to them, but I don't know if it's necessarily salt. I think it would depend on how the ions interact with your taste buds.
I also like that the way the question's worded, obviously we know exactly what is meant, but like, is salt salty? It's like, yeah. No, any salt is salty.
Yeah, because that's what it is.
It's like, but does it taste salty? Ah, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, Yeah, that's interesting. I've never wondered that. How cool.
You never been like, what's low sodium salt? How could it possibly?
No. I wondered that, I guess. I just don't think, when we've talked about that salt is a broader category of just, what you said, a metal and a non-metal. I don't think I've wondered then, do they taste salty? But, I mean, as soon as he asked it, I was like, yes. Now I wanted to know. I have to know.
Yeah. So maybe we could do a broader episode on that as well.
Ready for the next one?
Yep, I'm ready.
From Ed on Instagram. Do chemicals react to sound waves?
Okay, there is, Ed, this is a great question. There's a whole field of chemistry called sonochemistry, which is the use of sound waves, usually within the ultrasonic range, to boost or alter chemical properties and reactivity. And so there's a whole field around the reaction of sound waves and chemicals. So I guess the answer to your question is yes. I'm not a sonochemist, and so I don't have a lot of insight into it, but I will say that this doesn't surprise me because like waves is sound waves and is like somewhere on the spectrum of waves being, the way energy moves, right?
Right.
So
right.
I think sound waves, though, is technically like something traveling through matter. I don't know exactly.
Yeah. I think you even talked about this at one point, or maybe it's something else I've watched or listened to where it's like just different densities of air, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that.
Yes.
But wow.
We talked about that with our vocal cords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Helium.
Yep.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
The pitch of our voices.
Yeah, that was a fun episode.
Wow. Cool.
So, yes, and it makes sense when you think about it. And even like those, sorry, I knocked over my water.
I like heard it, but I didn't know what it was.
Even, have you seen those like things that clean your jewelry and then it's like, oh, it's just this thing that cleans your jewelry?
Supersonic or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, so we have those in the lab. They're called sonicators, as they use literally sonic waves to break up particles and get them to go into a solution more easily. And so they literally just like break them up and make them really tiny. And so you've seen in that way a way that sound can interact with chemicals. You've already seen it if you've seen one of those commercials of cleaning the jewelry.
Wow, yeah.
And those things probably work, but also like, are they impacting the jewelry? I don't know.
There's one I've seen way more lately for some reason about like cleaning like your retainer. And stuff. Have you seen that? It's like a little just home supersonic thingy or whatever for like cleaning your retainer or Invisaligns or something like that. But I don't know why I get asked for that. I don't have retainer or Invisaligns. So, but I have been like, that seems super satisfying.
It is satisfying. I wish I had thought when I had access to that thing to put my jewelry in it.
Yeah.
Now I look at it and I'm like, but the one thing I worry about is would it break your jewelry?
Right.
Is a possibility, depending on what the stone is. Like, I have Alexandrite, right? So it's not as hard as like a diamond. So I could see it being impacted.
I think this begins the section of sourdough questions.
All right.
Are you ready to enter the goo?
I am ready. Let's see.
Okay. This first one comes from me work AD.
Yeah, this is a weird YouTube name.
I think it's me work 80. I have made sourdough many years ago and I had great success. Recently, I've tried multiple times to make sourdough and I have not been successful. I think my flour was the reason for the failure. As you stated in the podcast, whole wheat flour is the best. Reflecting back, I used whole wheat in the past, but the recent attempts, I was using unbleached white flour. What's the ideal room temperature to cultivate the sourdough culture from Me Work 80 on YouTube?
Okay, so honestly, the ideal room temperature depends on the yeast. Different strains of yeast will thrive at different temperatures. In general, there's like a nice window where it's like the lower end of that is in the 60s and the higher end of that is in the 80s to 90s. Is that what you've seen, Mason, in your research? He's nodding. And that's what I found roughly of like, oh yeah, seems to be roughly where it thrives. More heat or warmer temperatures means more energy is being, available. Heat is actually energy. So things often thrive in higher temperatures until they start dying because it's too hot. And then as they get into colder temperatures, as energy gets taken away, oftentimes their progress will slow down. So.
Do people use those warmers like what they do for kombucha? Those little like warming pads?
I think they probably could. Some people put them in a cool oven or something.
Yeah. If you're like in.
He said a proving box.
Proving box. Prove it. Prove it that they use that.
I have seen proving boxes in the Bake Off show, but also I think proving it's like a later stage. It is helping the yeast, but not for the starter, which is for the culture. I think is for the starter. And I've seen people I keep my starter in like a sunny spot, and so it's getting a little bit more energy, and so it's a little bit warmer versus if I keep it in a cold corner, dark corner.
I remember for kombucha, people use that because it's like you end up having these large jars of liquid, and some people were like, I'm in Idaho, it's cold up here right now, I gotta use a warming pad. Okay, you ready for this next one?
Yes.
Can I read this and then throw out my guess?
Yes.
Before you say what's true.
But don't read that my answer is written on there.
Oh, okay. I won't. Sourdough, and this is one of the ones I was going to ask. That's why I have a theory, sort of. This is from Rachel on the website, sent it through our website, which we love when that happens. Sourdough questions, since you mentioned it may be the topic of a future episode, a future Q&R, is there any basis to the claims that you shouldn't use stainless steel with your sourdough? It is claimed by others to be a myth. If it should be avoided for sourdough, why is it fine for packaged yeast? Why would it be fine for baker's yeast but not wild fermented yeast? I had heard this just from secondhand because my mother-in-law was doing sourdough. She had heard it somewhere else. And my immediate thought was, that sounds like hooey, Just thinking so many things would maybe actually ask you to use stainless steel so that it doesn't cause other problems. For instance, different tools you could use could retain stuff you don't want mixed in there, something like that.
Bacteria.
Right. Not that we don't want bacteria in sourdough, because we kind of do, I guess, right?
But the bad bacteria.
We don't want bad kind. And so there's so many things that are like, oh no, use stainless steel for this so that you don't contaminate something, or I don't know. And so I thought that seems like the weirdest thing to pick. If someone had said something else, if they said don't use plastic because it can occasionally be holding on to some bad bacteria and can ruin it. I could just see that sounds like some good theories, even if it doesn't happen every time. It seems like, I could just grab something like stainless steel that's much easier to get really clean and have not a lot of little pores in it or something, So I immediately thought, that seems like total hooey. Why would metal kill something?
That's your guess?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to give the background reason. But that's it.
Wait,
that's why you think.
Is there more? Could there be more background reason?
There's more. Okay.
Or where the theory even comes from?
That's what I'm going to talk about.
God, I don't know that.
So I couldn't find any evidence that this was true.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did find was some people on Instagram, I was like, who said they thought it was from the past when metal could react with the acidic nature, before it was stainless steel, and it was just a regular metal bowl of one whatever, and so it'd be more likely to react with the acid. And that does make sense. I could see if we have acidic starter culture over time stored in this one thing, that it could eat away at the metal, the acid could. And then what did you say, Mason? Lead pot is what he said. It could eat away at the metal, and then then the metal is now we don't just have our starter culture and our flour and our water and the acid. Now we also have metal in there, and that would change the flavor of the bread and would probably not be ideal. And so that idea that it could have reacted over time if you put your starter that was acidic in something metal, not stainless steel, but true metal. I could see that. I could see that. But I don't think that's something you have to worry about now, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I think it's unlikely to get that acidic, you know? So it's probably fine. People use stainless steel bowls all the time. Bakers use stainless steel. Mason, do you rise yours in a stainless steel bowl? Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also say, so specifically, Rachel asked, why is it fine for baker's yeast but not a wild yeast? But baker's yeast a lot of times is sold like in little packages.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not acidic at that point, you know, it's not active.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be fine. But I do think it would only be, it's like probably, I could see the acidity of the culture over time corroding acid. And so maybe not keeping your starter in metal forever. But honestly, I think it's probably fine.
You know what I was thinking about too? This is probably where some of my impressions of this came from, is that in kombucha, again, not exactly the same thing, but you're dealing with living things that you want to grow and other things you don't want to grow. Like people get frustrated all the time when like, oh man, I got some mold growing in my kombucha, gotta start over.
Yeah.
They're all like, cause you have a spigot on your big thing where you're growing, where you're doing your first fermentation. All these people say you have to have a stainless steel spigot because the plastic ones just fall apart over time. It's just submerged for such a long time. Yeah. And it's fermenting and it starts to break it down and you don't want, you know, plastic stuff in there and then it shouldn't last very long. So they actually say you need to, and they also say usually it helps to have a lower chance of mold. Yep. As long as you're cleaning things well. That's probably another reason why I thought like, no, it seems like stainless steel is better. But
the other thing I think about your starter though, if it's in if it's in glass has a more steady temperature. Like you have to put more energy in to like a thick walled glass container than a thin walled stainless steel container. The stainless steel container, I think, would be like gaining and losing temperature much faster. And so I could see there being some kind of benefit to like the glass sort of, it's harder to increase the temperature of it and decrease so that it's like fluctuating more gently. That could also be
interesting.
So, but yeah, I don't think it's really, I think it's probably fine.
Yeah. Huh. Crazy how things that really get spread, but like, you know, had some truth at some point or something. Yeah. That have we lost, you know, all reasons to think that, but we just, there's still like a little bit of like I don't want to ruin my thing. Yeah. So I'll just avoid it, you know?
Yeah.
Ready for the next one?
Yep.
This next one's from Chemmunity. Just kidding. Timothy P., one of our Chemmunity members on Patreon. Why do people consider sourdough bread to be gluten-free when it's made from wheat?
I think people don't know what gluten is. Okay, here's what I actually think. I think that a lot of bread that's bought from the store has a lot of additives. And I think a lot of people who think they're allergic to gluten are probably allergic to additives or, you know, there's sugar in there and that could inflame their gut or, you know, preservatives, whatever. And so I think a lot of times people are like thinking they're avoiding the gluten, but they're more likely actually avoiding those irritants. And so sourdough bread has gluten in it. That's the structure that makes the bread. And actually that goes really well with the next question as well from Flory. But so the gluten structure is there either way. But I think what sourdough bread is actually lacking that a lot of other breads have is anything but flour, a little bit of salt, and then like your culture, you know? So it doesn't have anything else in it. And so if there's anything other than gluten that's consistently in bread sources that you're buying from other places, well, then those are probably going to irritate you. So I think it's probably not, it is not gluten-free, but it might be lower inflammation or lower irritation, you know, something like that.
My mother-in-law's had this exact same reason for liking sourdough. She doesn't think it's gluten-free, but she has noticed that it's less irritating to her. So
yeah, and like I said, there are some things that show that it might have lower impact on your blood sugar depending on your culture and things like that.
Interesting. Ready for the next one from Flory? This is from Flory on YouTube. Hi, this is the first time listening to you. I'm full in with sourdough. I started a business in Valle Sagrado. Peru 5 months ago selling sourdough bread. I like that you talk about the structure of sourdough bread. Today you concentrated more in the starter, but check out about the bread structure. Thank you. I liked it.
Okay, so Flory, we have done that. Welcome, by the way. Welcome to the fold. Welcome to the chemistry pod Chemmunity. If you check out, we have an episode that is called "What is Gluten," and that will get all into the structure of it for you. So, but it's really the thing that underlies the structure of the bread.
2 questions. These are both from David M. Would milled cricket flour work for the starter? Or do you want me to ask you both of them or do one at a time?
I think milled cricket flour is literally milled crickets, and I don't know, but gross.
That I was like, surely not.
I went and looked it up, and I was like, is this really what it sounds like? And then I was like, you know, and that's as far as I got. I mean, probably it would work. It's like a dense source of nutrients, and bacteria is probably happy to be in that environment, but not for me. Not interested in that option.
I'm like, can't believe that exists. I'm so surprised.
It does. It definitely does.
Wow. Okay, next from Dave, also from David M. What are the names of the sourdough starters of A, Mason, and B, Jam's mother-in-law? We gotta know.
All right, Mason, this is your time to shine. Actually, I'm about to yield my microphone to Mason.
Whoa.
Who's going to come over here and answer this question and the next one.
Yeah, I guess I could, while they're changing places and stuff like that, I could say that I don't know the name of my mother-in-law's starter. Did you happen to ask her, by the way? I didn't even think about it. I do know that, David, my mother-in-law took a long break from really making sourdough. And then she got back into it with a friend of ours who she got some starter from that was a gluten-free starter, actually. Even though it was already easier on her stomach, she was like, oh, it'd be kind of cool to just be using a non-gluten flour from the very beginning. And the Clevelands both are gluten-free people, so they had some, and so Barb started doing that.
I just messaged her to ask, so stand by.
Nice. Barb, we'll see if she's still awake. Anyway, over to you, Mason.
Okay. Well,
welcome.
Yeah, it's just fun to be on the show for, I guess, the first time actually on it. Sitting down at having an assigned mic.
Yeah.
My sourdough starter. So the name on the jar is Doughboy.
Oh, people name it. Is that what the question is?
Yeah.
How did I not know that?
Yeah, when you start your sourdough starter, you're supposed to give it a name or something. But
I can tell you right now, Barb does not have a name. I could have told you that. Sorry, she doesn't know about that. Neither do I. Okay.
And technically, it's Doughboy 2 because I took a long break between, and I'm still just using that same. It's like when I put the flour mixture that I use for feeding it. And so
got it.
And he really does say, like, I gotta go feed Doughboy. Like that's a thing that happens in our house.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, you ready for the next one, Mason?
Yeah.
Can you take us back? How did you start doing sourdough?
I was bored.
Oh,
there we go.
Okay.
Like the process would.
Yeah, that was my question. Is can you tell us your process?
Okay.
That was what I wanted to know. Would you just like explain how you started the starter, and did you see like the chemical phases that we talked about? Like, was it gross at first and then it got like clean or something?
Yeah. I don't know that it was gross at first, but it was more of just, oh, look, it's active. It's doing something. Can I make bread? And no, you can't. It's very quickly. So it's like you mix your flour and water and you let it sit there for a couple of days and it doesn't really do much. And then maybe around day 3 or 4, just as guesstimate, it starts to bubble up and you're like, oh, that's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then we're like, but that's too early based on like what everyone says. You know, it's like it's going to take a couple of weeks. So then you get online and you start looking around. You're like, oh no, that's just the fake rise or whatever it's called.
It's from the bad bacteria.
Yeah, and so that's like like what you said, the bacteria battling it out.
I see. Okay.
And then it calms down, and you're like, oh dang it, it's dead for like a few days, maybe a week. And then slowly it starts to, if you just keep feeding it, it'll start bubbling up and doing what it should do.
Interesting.
So you feed it, like, what do you feed it and how often?
Skittles.
Well, some pitfalls that I've seen.
Sorry.
Yeah. You just toss some kid whatever I have for dinner.
Just some treats because it's just a good job. You know?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're a growing boy. Yeah, so some pitfalls that I've seen people do, or that actually the first time I tried to make a sourdough starter, mine got moldy. And it was because, I think it was just because I wasn't cleaning the jar out good enough between feedings, or I was just adding in the water and flour for the feeding. And, you know, for the 2 weeks or whatever, at the end of it, it kind of it turned into a starter, but then it also had some weird spots on it. So I was like, don't know that I want to use this. So the next time I tried it, I was very, like, every time I fed it, I kind of cleaned out the jar, gave it just a rinse, and then put the new flour, water, and starter, or like the leftover starter in it.
Got it. So is that a jar that you like? You're putting some flour and water in, and you're stirring it, and then you're adding it into that. Yeah, into the starter jar. So that's the jar that that jar for feeding is the one you're cleaning really well.
The jar that I keep it in all the time.
Oh, really?
So yeah. So I take my feeding process is I'll take out probably 30 grams of starter, set it to the side, then clean out the jar. So I'll either compost the rest of the starter, or we've made pancakes with some of the starter, discard. And then I add flour and water in there, and then add that 30 grams of starter back in.
Got it.
And then let it sit.
Got it. Okay.
Right now, I've been making bread about once a week for a while. And so I bake on Wednesdays. So on Mondays, I'll take it out and kind of feed it for a couple of days, like, because I leave it in the fridge. So Monday, take it out of the fridge, feed it so it kind of warms up and it gets bubbly. Tuesday, feed it the amount that I need so that on Wednesday, it'll be ready to go.
Got it. Interesting.
And then Wednesday, make my bread, feed the starter again, put it back in the fridge, and then it sits in there till the next Monday.
Interesting.
Or until the next time I bake bread.
Interesting. Do you have any follow-ups for him?
Sometimes it's perfect. Sometimes it's overproved. A few times it's been underproved, but more so now I let it sit too long.
Have you figured out your ideal, like, recipe? Because I know that there's a lot of people who are like, okay, once you get your starter going, you get that good. Now you're in the phase of like experimenting with like how many grams of starter and then how much flour and water to mix that with, and then like that, like you're saying, the like phases of, oh, I mixed that all together and then I let it rest and then I did this and that, and like those phases and stuff. That's the thing that keeps me from even getting into this, just knowing there's so many steps to from even once you've got a starter that's good and alive and didn't go wrong, and all those steps to actually baking some bread. Have you landed on a recipe that you love?
So I just found like the standard, I got a recipe from Reddit, one of their standard ones, and it actually allows you to make it in one single day instead of, because a lot of recipes are like, oh, start the night before, do all this stuff, and then let it sit, and then the next day come back to it and do some more stuff to it. So this one, you heat up the water that you use to when you mix your starter, your flour and your water, like for the first dough. So you heat that up so it kickstarts the starter going through and, like, you know,
nice
bubbling up and whatnot.
Sounds like chemistry.
Everything is chemistry. I do have a follow-up for you.
It sounds eerily like chemistry.
Sounds like science, maybe. I do have a follow-up from Stillpoint on YouTube who asked, what's the name of Jam and Mason's coffee roasting company? I love coffee. That's what they said.
Take it away.
It's Good Coffee. Good spelled Goode.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Good.
And how do you order a good coffee?
At good.coffee.
Mm-hmm. So GOODE.coffee.
That's
Couldn't
it.
be easier. Imagine that like it was someone's last name. Like I think there's a actor or two whose last name is Good spelled that way. Neither of our last names are that, but pretend there was somebody who was that name and then they made a coffee company.
Yeah.
Would be pretty cool, huh?
Okay, well, I think that's all we have for Mason, but is there anything else you want to tell the people about what it's like to be my husband?
I get to learn a lot about chemistry. It's pretty great.
You heard it here first.
You know?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your participation.
Yes, thanks for coming.
Okay. I think the last one we have is just some nice comments from people on the interwebs.
Mm-hmm. I'll do the first one if you want to do the second one.
Sure.
I feel like I'd like to hear the way you read the second one. This is from Stillpoint, who just asked the last question about coffee. This is one of the only sane channels on YouTube these days. Informative, fun, interesting. Thanks for keeping it human. Much love, Stillpoint.
Oh, that was sweet. And Stillpoint gave us a lot of really nice comments, so I wanted to give them a shout out back. It's so nice, and we see them all, and we appreciate every single one. It means so much to us.
And being called sane, honestly, like that's huge. That's big.
On YouTube, man, there's lots of channels.
Yeah, for real. And I don't feel super sane all the time. So the fact that someone's like, no, I see you and you're sane enough for me, I think that's a lot.
Especially when we were recording at midnight.
Yep. Which, speaking of,
so this next one, this is from Jeanette, who is one of our Chemmunity members on Patreon. Jeanette said, great job on the website, Jam, and being Melissa's sidekick. Nice. You're my sidekick.
I'll take that. I like
it. As a mother and grandmother, I cannot help but be concerned for the long-term possible ramifications of your newer late-night recording sessions. Please abandon them as soon as possible. The way she said, please abandon them, really made me laugh. Wonderful podcasters Gabriel Borud and Connor Dillon of Science Unscripted did an episode on this once. Thank you both for all you do. So I thought that was nice.
That's awesome. And also, it's funny because I guess we've been talking about it, but how we've been doing this schedule of recording like over a year, right?
Yeah, I think we started after your paternity leave.
That's right. Yep.
And so, but I do think it's what changed is my schedule. I started a new work where I had to get up and be teaching at 8 a.m. the next day. But not to worry, Jeanette. I got a new work schedule this semester, so I don't have to teach until 10 a.m. on Wednesdays after we record. And next semester, I don't have to be on campus on Wednesdays at all. So my plan will just be to sleep as long as I need to. So ultimately, I think our sleep schedules are going to be okay.
We have talked about changing it, so we're not like, no, we love this, and you'll pry this recording schedule from our cold, dead hands.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for your concern. It is a little hard. Also, I wonder when we've talked about it, I think you have said the time a few times. But I do wonder if sometimes we say like, chemistry at night and joke about it. If it seems like it's really late, like if we're going well into the night, it's really not. Like it's 12:20 right now.
And this is late. Normally we're done before midnight.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And we've also talked about, like batching them, recording them on Saturdays instead. But right now we only do this every other week. So maybe that can also help you is we're only doing this like 26 times a year. And sometimes probably less because of holidays and whatnot.
Yeah, that's true.
So, all right. Well, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for asking questions, and thanks to our special guest, Mason.
Yes, thank you, Mason. And it was so cool to hear it from the Mason himself, you know.
Now you've seen him,
yeah.
You know him.
I think he's poked his head in a couple times, but you've really gotten to experience Mason more now, more than ever before.
Yeah.
So thanks for your questions. As always, send us your questions, thoughts, ideas, feedback, follow-ups, whatever, on our website at chemforyourlife.com. That's chemforyourlife.com. Share your thoughts, ideas, questions. But to help us keep our show going and contribute to cover the cost of making it, you can join a super cool Chemmunity of patrons. You got to hear from some of our awesome Chemmunity members today in these questions. Jeanette, Timothy, am I missing anybody else who did Latila? So pretty awesome. Some pretty great questions.
Mm-hmm.
And we thank you for being a Chemmunity member by giving you different perks, ways of saying thank you. Behind the scenes stuff, ad-free feed of the show, exclusive virtual coffee hour stuff. You can join that group at patreon.com/chemforyourlife. But if you're not able to do that, you can still help us by subscribing on your favorite podcast app, writing, review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, subscribing on YouTube, leaving a comment over there saying, hey. Those things help us to share chemistry with even more people, help more people find the show, help them have chemistry of their everyday life explained.
Absolutely. And this episode of Chemistry for Your Life was created by me and Jam, and I guess Mason too. Special thanks to him. And the episode was made possible by our community. So thank you to our Chemmunity members. And those members are Chris and Claire S., Hunter R., Katrina B., Lynn S., Scott B., Stephen B., Tim P., Brian K., Chelsea M., Dorian V., Elizabeth P., Heather R., John T., Jesse R., Latila, who you heard a question from today, Rachel R., Autoclave, Avishai B., Chelsea B., Sierra L., Colin R., Emerson W., Erica B., Jacob T., Jeanette N., who you heard a question from today, Julie S., Christina G., Sarah M., Suzanne P., and Venus R. Thank you all so much for everything that you do to make our show sustainable and possible.
And it looks like we actually have some references from this one. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So references from this episode can be found in our show notes or in the description of the video on YouTube.
Yay, chemistry.
Yay, chemistry.
Yay, community.
Yay.